Video 9. Sizing a solar electric system. Once you have estimated your electrical demand and implemented a strategy to use energy more efficiently, it is time to determine the size of the system you'll need to install. This is a setup usually performed by professionals, solar electric installers. The size of the system varies, of course, depending on electrical demand and your goals. It's important to note that PV systems fall into three broad categories: a grid-connected system, a grid-connected system with battery backup, and off-grid system. A grid-connected system or a utility-connected solar electric system can be sized to meet some or all of your electrical needs of a home or a business. Excess electricity, if any, is fed back onto the grid, running the electrical meter backward. These systems are by far the most popular. A grid-connected system with battery backup is similar to a grid-connected system but has a battery backup bank to store electricity. These systems will continue to supply critical loads if the grid goes down. And as their name implies, an off-grid PV system are not connected to the utility grid. These are completely autonomous electric generating systems, and surplus electricity are usually stored in batteries for use at night or on cloudy days. Sizing a grid-connected system. Sizing a grid-connected system is the easiest of all. To meet 100% of your needs, simply divide your average daily electrical demand in kilowatt hours by the average peak sun hours per day for your area. As noted in the initial video, peak sun hours can be determined from solar maps and from various websites and tables. As an example, let's suppose that you and your family consume 6000 kilowatt hour of electricity per year, 6000 watts. So that is 500 kilowatt hour per month, and that is about 17 kilowatt hour per day. This calculation yields system size if the systems were 100% efficient and unshaded throughout the year. Unfortunately, no PV system is 100% efficient. As a result, most solar installers rate grid-connected PV systems with 22 to 25% of losses. This loss is due to voltage drop as electricity flows through wires. Resistance at fuses, breakers and connections, dust on the array, and inefficiencies of various components such as the inverter. So if your PV array is not shaded by trees or nearby buildings, you need to have a 22 or 25% larger system to provide a 17 kilowatt hour of electricity per day. Shading even a small amount dramatically lowers the output of a PV system. To determine the amount of shading on a PV system, a professional solar site assessors and solar installers use a sun path analysis tool called the Solar Path Finder. The Solar Path Finder and similar devices determine the percentage of solar radiation blocked by landscapes such as trees, hills, buildings, so on. This data is then used to calculate the final size. You need to increase the array size to take into account any shading. Solar installers can also size a PV system based on the budget. How much money a person has to spend, because not everyone can afford a PV system that meets 100% of their needs. So, for optimum performance, PV systems generally require a site where an array is unshaded at least 3 hours on either side of the solar noon, that is from 9 am to 3 pm. This portion of the daily solar window accounts for 75% to 80% of the sun's radiation, depending on the season. Sizing an off-grid system. As a rule, off-grid systems are sized according to the month with the highest demand, which is often the month with the least sunshine. There are months with highest electrical demand and are also the shortest and typically the cloudiest months of the year in cold climates. First, determine the month with the highest demand. Then divide the average daily consumption by the average peak sun hours during that month to determine the size of the array. Then adjust for efficiency and shading as described previously. The size of the battery bank must also be carefully calculated. Battery banks are sized to provide sufficient electricity to meet a family or business's need during cloudy periods. Most battery banks are based on a 3 to 5 day reserve, so they can provide enough electricity for 3 to 5 days of cloudy weather. Battery banks are also sized to prevent deep discharging during this period. That is, so the batteries do not discharge more than 50% of their capacity. Deep discharging can seriously damage batteries. Sizing a grid-connected system with battery backup. PV arrays in grid-connected systems with battery backup are sized much like grid-connected systems discussed earlier. As a rule, the size of the array is based on expectations, that is, the percentage of electrical demand you'd like to meet your system to meet, taking into account peak sun hours, efficiency, and shading. Battery banks are sized according to the electrical requirements of critical loads, that is, the electrical load that would be needed during a power outage. Electrical loads are usually restricted to pumps or fans of heating or cooling systems, well pumps, sump pumps, refrigerators, and a few lights. Indispensable medical equipment may need to be included as well. Because these loads require less energy than the entire home, batteries are typically much smaller in grid-connected systems with battery backup than off-grid systems. Payback. Payback is a term that gained popularity in the 1970s. It was used to determine whether energy conservative measures and renewable energy systems made economic sense. Payback is the number of years it takes a renewable energy system or energy efficiency measures to pay back its cost through savings it generates. Payback is calculated by dividing the cost of a system by the anticipated annual savings. If $8,575 is the cost of the system, it produces 6,000 kilowatt hours per year. A grid power cost around 9.5 cents per kilowatt hour. The annual savings of $570 yields a payback of 18.8 years. In other words, this system will take 15 years to pay for itself. 15 years to pay for itself. From that point on, the system produces electricity free of charge. While the payback of 15 years on this system seems long, don't forget that the return on investment on this system calculated earlier was 6.6%, which is a very respectable rate of return on your investment or any investment these days. Here ends video 9, Sizing a Solar Energy System.